Hello, this is Marco Arroyo. First off, I'd like to send my prayers and condolences to the Asian victims of Atlanta who were killed in another heinous hate crime. In this country, hate crimes and harassment towards minorities such as the Asian American community has been going on since the start of the pandemic, and it has become a major problem. From March 2020 through February 2021, there have been found to be nearly 3,800 incidents of hate, discrimination, xenophobia, or attacks on Asian Americans reported by the AAPI social organization that tracks these incidents in the United States. The organization relates these events towards the racist rhetoric from politicians and from former President Donald Trump. Down in the description box below, I have linked a couple of donations and petitions that you can use to sign up for to ideally end things like what happened in Atlanta to ever happen again anywhere around the world, especially in the United States. Thank you. Because they were Asian. The main premise of this court case, in which the law established that Asian immigrants or Asian Americans couldn't testify or have the right to testify against white citizens. I believe this court case began to result in a lot more anti-Asian hate and violence towards the community, and as history goes on, it began to become much more apparent. For example, on October 24th, 1871, more than 500 white and Hispanic rioters surrounded a small Chinese community in Los Angeles that killed at least 17 men and boys who were lynched and hung across other downtown areas. 8 of the rioters were eventually convicted of manslaughter, but no one was ever punished in the end. Or the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which was a United States federal law signed by President Chester A. Arthur on May 6, 1882, that prohibited all immigration of Chinese laborers for 20 years and even being extended for more than 60 years before it was repealed in 1943. Or the Rock Springs Massacre in 1885, where 100 to 150 thugs surrounded and attacked Chinese mine workers, killing 28 people and burning down nearly 79 homes. Don't forget the internment camps around the 1940s during World War II. After Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, the US government took basically or almost damn near every Japanese person in the United States to internment camps and surrounded them with nothing but horrible and harsh conditions. And to make it a little bit more modern, the murder of Vincent Chin, who was 27 years old, a Chinese American man who was beaten to death by two white guys who picked a fight with him in a bar and even blamed Chen for taking their auto industry jobs, which resulted in him getting beaten down by a bat that killed him several days later. In court, the judge gave the man that murdered him a $3,000 fine and only probation. You can see there are many examples of anti-Asian hate crimes throughout history. And when researching it for this video, it was very in the beginning of the video, I mentioned how Asian communities and Black communities have a conflicting relationship with each other, and how that conflicting relationship relates to our tension-filled bond. In fact, I really want to explain this new term that I found out on the internet that kind of explains and ties everything together, called the middleman theory. The middleman theory is an idea or a term that describes the relationship Asian Americans play between white people and Black people. According to the term, Asian Americans play as a sort of linking partner to other groups, and while the other groups are divided by class or race. In this relationship, Asian Americans can be seen as profiting from both ethnic groups, which fuels the stereotype of the model minority stereotype from white people, but also a distrusting from Black people. From the Black point of view, Asian Americans could be seen as the same as white people for their many privileges, including their larger medium income and also their results for having less punishments for their crimes. But a large percentage of Asian Americans share a same view of Black people as white people, and that Black people just aren't capable of getting ahead. I also want to add that inside of Asian immigrants' homes, there were Asian students that are taught to avoid confrontation and not speak out against racist remarks in school and home environments, allowing bigotry to persist that includes Black people. This type of parenting style allows microaggressions to pursue that plants into their kids' heads that to not to go to shady neighborhoods, to avoid certain people and don't look those people in the eyes, and run away and run home whenever you see these people. This type of rhetoric and saying could also result in one of the most ignorant comments in an Asian immigrant home, or just any ignorant person against Black people. The saying is, at least you're not Black. What I also want to add that adds into the history of racial tension between the Black and Asian communities is the overall falsified images of both of the communities, which view Asians as more successful minorities that other minorities should aspire to be, which they very much are. Asian people are very successful and they deserve to be, but it leaves unnoticed the history of oppression against African Americans. These nuanced forms of racism only foster more animosity, not just in Asians but in African Americans too, who view each other in a sort of competition with each other, not just socially but economically as well. In a Vox article that I used to make up the points for this video, the link in the description below if you want to read it, there is a quote by, and again, sorry if I mispronounce these Asian names, my apologies, but there's a quote by Yin Lee Inspiritu that says, and I quote, "Many of these immigrants didn't intend to be small businessmen. The structural context is that Korean immigrants couldn't regain the employment and educational status they once held. Their proximity to Black people was because they were only able to start businesses in economically disadvantaged areas. This, coupled with the fact that anti-Black racism and financing mean Black people couldn't often start their own businesses, which sparked bitterness on both sides. Korean Americans consumed American media and internalized the falsified racist depictions of Black Americans as violent, uneducated, and poor, while Black Americans viewed them as untrustworthy, not only because of the reasons I just mentioned, but also because of the Korean War that was going on around the time." Another example I can honestly think about that kind of sparked more controversy and a more mainstream bitterness between Asians and Blacks in America would honestly have to be the LA riots of 1992. In 1992, 4 white LAPD officers were acquitted in court after the inhumane videotaped brutal beating of Rodney King in Los Angeles. What resulted was one of the most televised riots in U.S. history, which lasted 5 days and 5 nights and brought many Korean American stores and businesses to be destroyed and burnt to the ground. Now, of course, these violent protests and these riots that destroyed many Korean American stores and businesses would also give a negative taste to a lot of Asian Americans' mouths at the time. Just to even out the playing field, I want to introduce another point that could be from the black point of view side at the time, which was, if you're aware, the killing of Latasha Harlings. Now, if you don't know who Latasha Harlings was, she was a 15-year-old girl in Los Angeles in 1992 who was shot and killed by Soon Ja-do, who was a Korean American convenience store owner who shot Latasha Harlings in the back of her head, killing her instantly, off of suspicions that Latasha was stealing a bottle of orange juice while not realizing that Latasha had money in her hand the entire time and was actually willing to pay. Now, Du was tried and convicted of voluntary manslaughter, which would have given her a sentence of 16 years, but the judge only allowed her 5 years probation, 400 hours of community service, a $500 expense, and some funeral expenses as well. To conclude on this video, I have to let you guys understand that the overall cause of this historical tension is and will always be white supremacy. Pastor Chang in the Vox article down below says, and I quote, "Racism and white supremacy have created long-standing rifts between communities of color. The way the system works, the rhetoric around black and Asian tensions will be used to discount the white supremacy that actually drives these tensions." Now, if you remember me saying earlier in the video on how the model minority stereotype against Asian Americans promotes them being wealthy, smart, healthy, docile, and spiritually enlightened, Kurashige in the same Vox article down below says, "The model minority stereotype really isn't meant to define Asian Americans. Rather, it's meant to define African Americans as deficient and inferior to white people by using Asian Americans as a proxy or a pawn to serve that purpose. It was never an accurate portrayal of Asian Americans, but actually consciously meant to distort and stereotype Asian Americans. While us as black people and certain African groups are seen as educated, like Nigerians have some of the most highest academics that you can see across the country, we aren't really given that amount of shine and light because of that myth, and also because of how, the US government just doesn't want black people to be seen as successful or winning in any type of way. So I think out of everything that I said in this video, the number one thing I think I would really want everybody in this video to learn is that white supremacy is the number one cause of our constant tension. We have been put in positions since our inception in this country to basically fail and just to fight each other for white people's amusement and not try to thrive inside and outside of ourselves. So I think in terms of solidarity, I would suggest that people educate themselves on the history of yours and ours oppression and try to have some type of, thought and less prejudice and hate and more understanding and compassion, because we both as minorities have gone through a lot because of the white man, and we would just be putting in more white men's enjoyment if we kept fighting each other on the internet or on the streets or anything like that. Thank you all for your time for watching this video, and I've definitely learned a lot. I hope you learned a lot too. And make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more videos. I upload every Friday, so by next week Friday you'll definitely have a new video by me. I want to keep the next video a surprise because it's a topic that I think a lot of us, especially in the Generation Z, could relate to. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe for more videos, because I just like, come on, what are you doing? That was stupid.